consumer science educator in Jefferson County, as Ron said. And one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is preserving your herbs. And I have a couple of different objectives tonight. I want to talk a little bit about when to harvest your herbs, how to clean them, and then a couple of different methods for preserving your herbs. And then I'll leave some time for questions at the end. So we want to consider what our end goal is when we are preserving our herbs. Mostly, depending on how you're going to use them at the end, will probably dictate how you preserve them to start with. There are some general considerations, but if you are specializing, for example, in using infused oils, then you're probably not going to want to freeze your herbs. But if you want an assortment, we'll talk about a lot of different ways that you can preserve them. There's a couple of different ways that we can, add herbs in low-fat soups. And if you're going to do that, you might choose to freeze them in water instead of an oil or a cream. You can create savory sauces from herbs and oils. And if you are just dehydrating or drying them, you can, of course, make like a calming tea or use them as regular herbs and spices like you normally would from the jars from the grocery store. So when you are harvesting your herbs, remember that the flavor comes from the oils in the cell walls. So we want to, if possible, avoid disrupting those cell walls. Most herbs are best if harvested right before the flowers first open. And where they grow really small at the top of the plant, those tips or those smaller leaves have a concentrated flavor. So don't discard those unless they've flowered. And in that sense, then your herbs are going to have might have a little bit more bitter of a taste there. It's recommended that you harvest your herbs on a sunny day. Mid-morning, of course, after the dew has evaporated, especially if you are considering dehydrating them, we want the least amount of moisture as possible. And of course, when we are harvesting our herb, we want to make sure that we are cutting them and leaving enough room for them to grow and continue to grow. So don't cut them off clear at the bottom. And of course, when you're cleaning, whenever you're working with food, begin with clean hands and prep surfaces. You want to make sure to remove the imperfect parts of the plant, especially if the leaves are bruised, if they've been eaten by bugs, or if there's any sort of disease. You'll have to evaluate whether or not that leaf or that part of the plant is worth keeping for you. And as always, inspect for dirt and insects. And we don't necessarily want to use soap on them, but we can rinse in cool water, gently shake off that moisture, and then you can pat it dry with a paper towel. I personally prefer the really absorbent paper towels, just the step below the blue automotive towels. That's what I like to use because they seem to absorb a lot of moisture. And you can, of course, also use a salad spinner. So that works well as well. So the most common way to preserve herbs is dehydrating, and this section is the biggest section this evening, mostly because it's most common and it's very simple. It doesn't take a lot of extra effort and it doesn't take a lot of extra time. So as you probably are aware, dehydration is the oldest form of food preservation. So we want to remove as much moisture as possible because when there's moisture there, it will tend to help pathogens and microbes grow. So we want to remove that moisture. When you're dehydrating, the water content can vary from 5 to 25% depending on the food. When we are dehydrating herbs, we want to make sure that it's even less than that because we're not dealing with a lot of fibers and a lot of plant cells. If you think about dehydrating, for example, apples, it's really dense, where we're dehydrating herbs and spices. It's just not as dense, so we can get it so that it's even less moisture. Dehydrating takes up minimal storage space, it's easy to transport, and it's fairly inexpensive. And tender herbs must be dried quickly to avoid molding. So a couple different ways that you can dehydrate. You can use a dehydrator. Using a dehydrator will put heat on the plant, on the harvested plant itself. Usually there's a setting for herbs for 95 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Try to make sure the plants aren't touching. When they overlap and touch, there's less air movement and those portions may not dry as thoroughly. So you'll end up with a really crispy plant and portions that aren't as crispy where they're touching. If they're larger leaves, you can of course remove those from the stems. And it's recommended you don't dry herbs with fruits or vegetables because of the flavors melding and there's too much moisture and you just can't get them as dry. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do a tray of apples and a tray of rosemary and a tray of basil, it's not going to bode well for you. So. Surprisingly, though, a microwave or microwave oven can be used for dehydrating your herbs. Herbs are the only foods that can be safely dried in a microwave because the leaves contain such little moisture and they dry quickly. That said, you need to keep your eye on it because if it gets too dry, it is possible for the paper towels to start on fire. So keep an eye on that one if you choose to use a microwave oven. I would recommend checking the wattage of your microwave oven. You don't want to go over 1,000 because then it's too hot, it dries too quickly, and it ends up cooking it instead of dehydrating it. So something to be aware of. Also keep in mind, obviously your microwave only works when the door is closed. It's unlike an oven where you can prop the door open and let some air circulate. So you really do have to keep an eye on that. When we are air drying, there's two different methods. The first is hanging to dry. This is fairly common and it's very aesthetic as well. If you like the look of that in your kitchen and in your home, just make sure that you don't hang it near the stove, near the sink, anywhere where there's going to be a lot of humidity, and you want to avoid it collecting dust. So it's recommended instead of hanging it like the picture shows, it's recommended that you actually punch holes in a paper bag with a larger hole at the top, put that paper bag over the bundle. And it's really convenient if you have a rubber band or elastic to put the elastic over the stems. That way, when they shrink naturally, the elastic also shrinks with it and you don't lose your leaves or your stems falling out. If you were to tie it with string, sometimes they can fall out. So, um, let's see here. If you're dehydrating seedy herbs, make sure and place that paper bag so that it will catch on the bottom. So you can still punch holes in it, either with scissors, a hole puncher, or you can just like stab holes in it with like a knife carefully. And then you can take the bag and like collect it at the top, and that will catch your seeds at the bottom. Just make sure there's no holes in the bottom. Another method for air drying is a flat lay method. And to dry it in that flat lay method, it's pretty self-explanatory. Just lay it in such a manner that air can still flow. You can, if you need to, you can layer it up to 5 layers of like paper towel and then leaves. Make sure they're not touching, then paper towel leaves, paper towel leaves. You may find that as the paper towels collect moisture that you need to rotate out the used paper towels and put new paper towels down. You can also use like fine mesh screening or say a food safe plastic screens. Sometimes I have found that simply just using my dehydrator trays with the screens, if the leaves are really small, I can use those trays. I just don't turn the dehydrator on and I don't put the lid on. And sometimes I'll spread those out on my counter if I know that my kids aren't going to be playing with them. So one way to ensure success with this method is to make sure that your home is low humidity and you have good air circulation. If we were in the Midwest or on the East Coast, it's really humid and this can be a tricky method to dehydrate just because the humidity is too high. So just something to be aware of. Oven drying, where there are some methods for using your oven, it's not the best option. If it's your only option, then there are ways to make it work. It's not recommended simply because even on the lowest setting, our ovens do not get, we can't turn the heat down low enough to where we don't cook those herbs in the oven. So if you choose to use an oven, make sure your temperature is as low as possible. Sometimes your oven light puts off enough heat that it's perfect. You still might need to have the door ajar just a tad just to get that air circulation, and just it's something that you're just going to have to watch as well. If your oven's not on, then you're less likely for it to, your paper towels to burst into flames. You can see the image here. The leaves are, it's kind of tricky to see at the very top picture. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but the very top picture, the herbs are, it looks like it's sage. It could be something else, but it looks like it's on like cookie racks. And then the racks are put on foil lined cookie sheets. So there's air on the bottom and the top, just so that there's that airflow for it to dry. So. One way to determine doneness when we are dehydrating our herbs, we want to make sure that they are crispy, that the leaves, the plant itself, once it's dehydrated, crumbles very easily. That doesn't mean you have to crumble all of it for storage. It just means that's how you tell it's done. Any moisture that's in there will encourage mold growth, and we want to avoid that where possible. So, when you are dehydrating fruits and vegetables, there's a step called conditioning where you put all of the fruits and vegetables like in an airtight container and you shake it and redistribute any moisture that's there. Well, instead of conditioning, there's a step in dehydrating herbs called treatment. And this is what destroys any insects or insect eggs that you may have missed. And there's two ways you can treat your dehydrated herbs. One of them, once they're dry, then you can use a dry heat, like putting it in your oven at 160 degrees for 30 minutes. Or you can you can like spread it out on a cookie sheet and stick it in your freezer for 48 hours. The heat method does reduce the flavor and is not suitable if you are planning on using those seeds at a later point. So just FYI. Storing dried herbs. It's really important that you have a plan to store them once they are dry. An airtight container is optimal. It doesn't matter if it's a mason jar with a two-piece lid. It could be an old clean and dry pickle jar with a pickle lid. That doesn't matter when we are storing dried foods. You can use a one or two-piece lid. It could be a silicone container. It can be plastic. It can be glass. It can be Ziploc bags. It does not matter. It could be Mylar bags. Um, but the point is that it is an airtight container that prevents food from reabsorbing any moisture that you might have in your home. And you might think, oh, the air in my home is super dry. But just when you're cooking pasta on your stove, your kitchen will, just that process of cooking the pasta, your kitchen will automatically just have more humidity in it. So you don't want to leave it like if you're making spaghetti sauce, for example, don't open all your jars of dried herbs and let it sit there on the counter. I would open it right when I plan to use it and then put the lid back on. And if I need to, I would put an a desiccant package in there too. Let's see here. This is a great opportunity if you have a vacuum sealing, like a mason jar vacuum seal contraption. They're about, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches tall and about as wide as a mason jar. They're about the size of a pint jar, actually. And this is a great opportunity to use those just so that what you're doing, you're removing the air, but you're making it so it's vacuum sealed so no moisture is going to get in there. Be sure to label and date, label and date, label and date, so you know what's in that jar. It's not essential that you keep the plants keep the leaves whole, but once you start to crush up the leaves, you are going to be releasing some of those oils and those aromatics. So if you want them to stay a little bit longer, that aroma to be more strong, leave them in their whole form if you can. And then you want to consume your dehydrated herbs within 12 months. Everything that we're going to talk about tonight, you want to consume it within 12 months. Excuse me. When we are using our dried herbs, keep in mind you can still use them in your normal recipes. Feel free to take a screenshot of this handy slide right here. 1 tablespoon of fresh is just as potent as 1 teaspoon dried, which is just as potent as a 1/4 teaspoon powdered. So, when you're using fresh, you have the beautiful color, you have the beautiful shape and the form of the herb, but when they're dried, they are more potent, teaspoon for teaspoon. So you only need about 1/3 amount of something dried compared to it being fresh. So just keep that in mind when fall time rolls around and you are out of all of your you're out of all your fresh herbs and you are digging into that delicious dehydrated herbs. Make sure they're stored in a cool, dark place, avoiding moisture and avoiding light if possible. You want to make sure that unless you have specifically combined herbs together and labeled them, that you are not putting them in some like containers that they're going to not be airtight individually, if that makes sense. You can always judge the strength of an herb by its aroma. So let's say you have some, I don't know, let's say you have some thyme in your cupboard and you don't know how old it is. Most herbs and spices from the grocery store do not have an expiration date on them. If you cannot smell it in the jar, there's a really good chance you just need to discard and get new. It's lost its potency, and that's how you kind of tell if something is expired in the herb world. Freezing herbs. This is a really fun way to utilize your herbs in a different way without having to worry about them if they're drying, if you're nervous about dehydrating and thinking, oh, what if I do have a little bit of mold? This is a foolproof way to make sure that you can still utilize the fruits of your labors, if you may. Again, we're going to start with clean herbs, fresh herbs. You can freeze them in olive oil, any kind of cooking oil that you prefer. If you prefer canola oil or avocado seed oil or whatever oil you prefer, you can freeze them in that oil. Water, cream, butter even. I didn't list butter, but you can do it in butter as well, melted butter. Um, so you'll just prepare them similarly. You can chop or destem them, leave a little bit of room for that freezing action that is going to expand. So ice cube trays work really, really well because they are a tapered container typically. So when they freeze, you can pop them out. Once your cubes are frozen, make sure that you remove them from the tray and store in an airtight container. It's important to remember that freezer burn, if it happens, is not a food safety issue, it's a food quality issue. So if you notice that, for example, this little cube that's popped out in the picture, if it's been in your freezer for a long time and you think, oh, that herb looks like it's freezer burned, it's just going to have a slightly different texture and it's still probably going to taste the same. It's just going to have a different texture because the moisture has left the leaf, if you will. Again, label and date, use within 12 months. I like using this when I'm doing like a pasta or a sauce. My kids love using these, putting them in like our chicken, like Alfredo sauces. They work really, really well. I can just say, hey, put in 3 or 4 cubes of whatever we're using. I thought this was kind of a fun visual. Feel free to take a picture of this, inspiring combinations to freeze. And a couple of notes while you're taking a picture of that, I want to mention. When you are chopping your herbs, make sure your knives are sharp, very, very sharp. If they are not sharp, essentially what you're doing is you are just crushing the plant or the leaves themselves. You want to make sure that they're sharp and that you are, if this is my cutting board and I have my herbs here, I might like roll them up so they're easier to slice. I'm going to draw my knife across instead of just putting my point down and doing a really fancy, fun, fast chef move. I want to draw the knife across. That will slice the plant cells instead of crushing them. So just a side note there. We want to avoid bruising the leaves if possible. You could also tear them. Tearing them would be acceptable as well. You just don't get as uniform of a shape. Freeze drying herbs. If you have access to a freeze dryer, this is another great way to, and very efficient. A lot of people like this because the leaves tend to keep their shape a little bit better. Um, be mindful of aromas. If you can't fill your whole freeze dryer with, let's say you're doing mint for an herbal tea. If you can't fill the entire freeze dryer with mint, don't mix your mint with your parsley, with your sage. All the flavors will meld together and you will wonder what you've done. So try not to do that. You'll remove the leaves from the stems or the stalks. You do not need to blanch or you don't even need to pre-freeze, excuse me. You do not need to pre-freeze herbs. They can just go straight into the freeze dryer. One note about the freeze dryer, when you're programming it, you can tell it to not go above 95 degrees in the warming process. That's important because it maintains the freshness and the flavor of the herb itself. Um, They should feel crisp when they're done. So about 12 to 24 hours, depending on the product. Again, label and date. And a desiccant package will help to keep it dry. To rehydrate them, you can simply add them to your soups, your stews, your sauces, your salad dressings, or you can mist them lightly with water and they just they perk right back up. Let's talk briefly about infusing herbs because infusing herbs is really trendy right now for both medicinal purposes and other holistic purposes. When we are infusing herbs into oils for food consumption, it is very important to be aware that botulism can happen in oiled foods. This is not something, it's in a mason jar is in the picture, but this is not something that you would preserve in a water bath canner or even a pressure canner, okay? Commercial infusions have acidified garlic and herbs, but there's been a lot of studies done about how botulism it thrives in that no oxygen zone. And when you put herbs and garlic in oil, there is no oxygen. And garlic is not acidic enough. It's a very low acid food. So, this is a direct quote from one of the publications that Lena just put here. Let's see, I'm pulling from the U of Idaho one that says when garlic or herbs are placed in oil, the low acid, oxygen-free environment favors the growth of these bacteria. They look pretty. They used to be on the stores at Porter's. People used to buy them by the dozens. It is not recommended that you eat those unless you consume them within 4 days, or after you infuse them for 4 days, you keep them in your refrigerator or freeze them. So I would highly recommend, if this is something you're very interested in, take a look at those last two links that Lena just posted on oil infusions. University of Oregon, University of Idaho, and Oregon State University both have great publications on that. So, using preserved herbs, we can use them in compound butters on our roasted meats and vegetables. We can put them in teas and beverages, sauces and dressings, using them as dry rubs. Of course, I wouldn't anticipate using frozen herbs in an oil as my dry rub. So, it depends again on how I'm going to utilize the herbs in their end, what I'm going to have their end state be as to how I would preserve them. Here's a couple of digital resources for you. Ball Mason Jars is the equivalent of the online Ball Blue Book. Their recipes are always changing. I thought this one looked really interesting, the marinated feta with the fresh thyme, oregano, and rosemary. But this again if you were to click on, go to this website and go to this recipe, the instructions they're not for water bath canning or pressure canning. The instructions are simply for it to marinate and you keep it in your refrigerator. This is that Making Garlic and Herb Infused Oils at Home publication that was put together by 3 or 4 of our University of Idaho educators a couple of years ago, as well as some other surrounding states from Oregon and Washington. And then, of course, the National Center for Home Food Preservation, University of Georgia, has a great section on herbs and dehydrating. So I would recommend that you check those out as well if you are interested. Victoria asked, does the insect residue fall off? If you are noticing that there is like, for example, a little nest of eggs or something, I personally would probably pluck that leaf and discard, give it to my chickens, whatever. I'm not going to try and scrub that off. If it is a insect crawling across the leaf, that's a different story. That's something you can shake off, you can rinse off. I'm going to go back to Victoria's question on storing fresh herbs in a salad spinner. I didn't mention that because my focus was on food preservation, like on a longer term. But if you were to take your herbs and put them through a salad spinner, I would recommend putting a paper towel in it just to kind of absorb that moisture. You can also, to keep if you have multiple herbs in your refrigerator or your crisper drawer, you can always wrap them loosely in heavy duty foil so that the aromas don't meld together. That's another option. So,
I
and
really
some,
like sticking them just in like a tall glass with
yeah,
just a little bit of water in the bottom.
yep,
That's not as good for things like cilantro that are going to go bad really fast, but for something like rosemary, it'll last like a month in the fridge like
yes.
that.
That's exactly what I was going to say next is
Oh,
you can
okay.
always put some of them in like a little jar with a little bit of water. You'll want to keep an eye on that water. It can grow things, so you may need to dump it off and put
Switch
fresh
it up.
water on occasion. Blackberry sage lemonade. Ooh, I'm gonna have to try that.
It's really
Herb saver
good.
gadgets. What are those
Surprising.
herb saver gadgets that Misha talks about?
So if Deanna has comments, she can, but I bought one of those and tried it.
Okay, an herb saver gadget.
Yeah,
Does it have a name?
it's like a half of a glass with a little tub in the bottom for water, and then like a clear part that goes over the top, and then like a nozzle at the top that you can kind of vent or fill more water in.
Sure.
It was complete trash. Just using a mason jar or a tall glass is much better.
Okay. And somebody was being fancy, and if it works, it might work for some things, it might not work for everything, for
It sounds
sure.
a lot like those inverted trays for preserving butter. Is that what it was
Yeah.
like?
Oh.
Yeah, it does sound
No,
like that.
it's kind of more upright. Maybe I should have saved it. I threw it away.
Mm.
That's how great it was. But also for me, it was one of those things that like, it's this big, it's going to take up that much space in a cupboard when I already have jars and glasses that do the same thing better.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
Hey, but by the way, Deanna, while I've
Yes.
got you, what about those inverted butter dishes? That hold a little bit of water and then seal it off. Are they any good, or do they make it worse?
If you are doing the whole clarificate, like the whole clarifying butter thing, the USDA recommends you always refrigerate your butter. That's what I'm going to say.
I think that's a good statement.
My family my family goes through butter pretty quickly. I've got a lot of kids at home, and so we like soft butter on our toast, but our butter goes under a cover, so there's no like, I don't know, nighttime
Well,
gnats on it or
and if
anything
it's
like
only
that.
lasting a day and a half before it's gone,
Yeah. The USDA does recommend that you refrigerate your butter, and I think it was Land O'Lakes. Forgive me if I have the wrong company, but I think they recently, like last week, came out with a statement that said their butter should be refrigerated. So, yeah. Is there a problem when you roast garlic in oil? The garlic and oil would be cooked. Would you still have the botulism problem? I'm assuming you're cooking it and promptly eating it. There's not a problem there. If you are cooking it in the oil and then like leaving
let's
it in
see.
a jar on the counter, you would still have the botulism problem. Absolutely.
Let's see
Um,
here.
I'm going up to a question from Victoria. You mentioned that freezing the herbs would kill the insects, but do they stick to the plant? It would depend on the plant and it would depend on the insect. If you have a large volume of insect eggs or insect, what do you call insect poop? Is there a name for that?
Well,
Brass.
it's either frass or honeydew, depending on which of the insects are.
So
It's kind of
if
more
if
like
there's
me.
an excessive amount of that, I probably would choose not to use it just for visual purposes, and my mind would not be able to eat that.
But that's why you wash it. The honeydew's really sweet.
Ron speaks from experience.
Now, again, like Tina
Protein.
said, that you wash it, right? You wash it off and wash it and shake it off and rinse it off and spin it off, whatever.
Yeah.
Hopefully, that'll get rid of your insect residues.
Yeah. I like what Lena said. Just don't think about it. There's no one at processing plants pulling the bug infested leaves off. You're right. Because I shouldn't say half, but on occasion, there's big stems on my green beans and my canned green beans that I bought from the store. So things like that get missed all the time. Extra protein for sure, somebody mentioned. So
You're eating
So
bugs anyway. Just know that if you're doing it at home, you're probably eating less bugs.
it's true.
and Reed may know the answer to this better, but honey, it is honey. Inspected honey is allowed to have bee
Yes.
parts in it.
Yeah.
A certain amount of bee parts in it,
right?
bee
Ketchup's
wings and
allowed to
things like
have
that.
so
So,
many bug parts
In
in
fact, that's
it.
one of the things that makes honey. If you're eating honey from around your area, it tends to supposedly help out with allergies and stuff because it's got a lot of those pollens and contagions that are a little bit in it that are slowly making you immune to it. Ketchup is the one that's got quite a large amount of bug insect parts that can be in ketchup. So ketchup is the one that has large amounts of.
that's why it's thick and red.
That's why it tastes good too, right, Ron?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I
Just
think
call it a
about
protein drink.
Oh, honey. The other thing about honey too is it's very dry. I mean, it's actually about as dry as alfalfa hay. It gets down to 14% moisture and even less. If the bees have actually turned it into honey. Um, and then also it's very acidic, and so honey doesn't have to be refrigerated. That's the reason why honey doesn't have to be refrigerated, is because the surface of honey and honey itself is so toxic to microorganisms and stuff. And it's one of the reasons why honey is the only thing that the USDA approves selling without a license. If you sell chickens, if you sell eggs, if you're selling even potatoes out of your garden, that's more highly regulated than selling honey
True.
to some extent. Is that right, Deanna?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but the state may regulate it. I know Utah regulates if the honey is processed at all, if it's spun out of the comb, your facility needs to be inspected.
I don't know. We'd have to check on that, but I know that in Idaho you don't have to. What is it? You don't have to label it either if you don't want. There are labels for honey, but I'd have to check on that, Ron. But it's less regulated than the other ones. I
Well,
guess is what
definitely.
I'm saying.
I'm just saying in Utah, you can sell raw honey, but
Yeah,
it has to be from an inspected facility. I couldn't just extract it from my garage or my kitchen
right.
unless they were to go and inspect it to make sure I didn't have pets there with
Oh
hair,
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And
And the other weird thing about honey is the definition of honey is just you could have a lot of high fructose corn syrup in your honey. Like lots of the honey packets you get have almost no honey in them. They're mostly high fructose corn syrup. The little packets you get at International IHOP, and stuff.
that's to keep them from crystallizing.
Yeah, so you can sell stuff that's honey that isn't what you would consider to be. We're way off the subject. Sorry,
Wow.
Deanna.
You're fine.
That's what
You're
happens
fine.
when you turn it over to me and Ron. I'll give it back to you, Deanna.
Well, I've given my whole presentation, but if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, I'll stick around for as long as I can. But it was a pleasure to be here and speak with you tonight about preserving your herbs.
I did harvest a whole bunch of cilantro Saturday.
And how are you preserving it?
I'm gonna freeze dry it. I've got it in my freezer right now. I'll freeze dry it.
Perfect. What's your favorite way to use it after it's freeze dried?
Oh, I only use it in my I make a lot of fresh salsa. That's why I use it in my salsa.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We like to freeze dry cilantro too.
I suppose I could start putting it in my eggs too if I get enough salt.
I've been
You
starting
gotta try some
to
love
use
it
a lot
for that,
more.
Ron.
I've been starting to use a lot more herbs and stuff that I've gotten in my salad. My salad used to be just just cabbage, lettuce, and tomatoes and cheese and dressing. But I've been sprinkling on a lot more of that, and then also I've gotten used to taking a lot of the dried mixtures of this stuff and putting it on my apple at night. I'll cut my apple and then put it on there. Man, it is good. So that's another way I've been using a lot of herbs and stuff.
I do grow arugula, quite a lot of arugula, which is kind of a spicy green, so it's good.
I'll end all of my comments by saying that later this summer, I have my planner. I took it out to my car when I ran home earlier this evening. I can't remember the exact date, but I will have Lena send you out the flyer. Leslie Blanche and I will be teaching a Capture the Flavor Herbs and Spices class. We encourage you to sign up. We teach you how to use a variety of herbs and spices, and you get like a tote bag. You get to take home a special spice blend from McCormick. This is a program that's been funded by McCormick and University of Maryland. We teach you where the herbs come from, how to utilize them, how to blend them. And I think we even provide a sample of the three different spice blends that you can take home one of the three. And there's also like multiple charts in a booklet on what spices and herbs you can blend together to get different flavors for different culinary action, if you will. So
Where will
I'll
those
have
be
Lena
at,
send that out.
Deanna?
What's that?
Where will those be at?
Leslie and I are going to teach at least one in Bonneville County, and we both have enough kits to teach at multiple places all over the state. But a lot of us FCS educators have multiple kits. Like I've got enough to teach like 100 people. So we'll be doing those throughout the summer and the fall. We typically like to do them in the fall because they are it's a shorter class and it's not like a multiple series. So we'll keep you
One
updated
one
on
day
it.
class, right?
It's a 1 day, yeah. It's a 75-minute class, and there's a survey at the end, and everybody always ends up staying and talking and eating the taste testing sample table. It's a lot of fun. So yes, I will teach it in Jefferson County. I'll teach it probably in Madison County as well. I'll probably teach it up in Ashton, for sure, Bonneville County, possibly Bingham County and Bannock County, and we can even go further south into Oneida, Bear Lake, Caribou, Montpelier. I guess that's Bear Lake. So
Cool. What kind of gardening questions do we've got coming up now? Thanks, Deanna. Really appreciate it. We're all ready to get our herbs harvested and stored now. Okay, ants living under my raised garden beds. Ants in and of themselves generally do not harm plants. Now you get carpenter ants will uh, burrow on trees and things like that. Rita, my experience has been the ants generally are
Yeah.
they harvest from aphids and things like that.
Yeah, they're
Not
more of a beneficial, if not benign. They won't really harm your crop that much. And probably if you're going to use a chemical like an insecticide, any chemical you use can, affect your garden. And so, if you're going to do anything, get the little ant hotel possibly, because that baits them into a trap where they can't get out, or modify the environment, which usually means, maybe modifying your irrigation will do a lot because ants need some kind of a dry place to be around. They're the opposite of aphids and all. They want it dry. So the first thing I'd try before I did any kind of a chemical, well, the first thing I'd do is leave them alone. I just wouldn't do anything about it. The second thing, if it was really bothering me, I would try environmental modification first.
yeah. And if you use baits, I don't use spray. If you use baits, generally they'll take that down into the colony
Hmm.
and kind of wipe out the colony that way. So you can do that,
Right.
but like Reed says,
But
if I,
not something like 7 granules where you leach it down in there. That would do it, but that would also be off label, and also,
yeah,
you're killing off an insect that, you're creating a problem that's probably way worse than the insects themselves.
right,
I'm not against using insecticides, but I'm kind of against using insecticides against an insect that's causing no disease.
yeah. Our tendency is to throw nature out of balance if we're,
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Ron. I mean, ants in your garden means that you've got harborage for the ants, which means that it's a pretty insecticide-free environment. It's an environment that is great for biota. So
yep, yep,
it can be an indicator that you're doing the right things.
yep.
Right, what you meant.
Diversity in our environment's good.
Yeah.
So we've had questions. Let's try to think of questions that have been coming in. I'm
Zach,
not
you got
Well,
sure.
the big question is, I went out for the past 2 days. All I've been doing is going around to everybody's yard, showing them what frost looks like, what frost damage looks like, 'cause it is everywhere. And there's a lot of people. There's no leaves on their tree. The tree leafed out, and there's no leaves. Like a lot of people's golden rain tree, they're leafless right now, and they had leaves. So to the general public, that looks like, hey, my neighbor must have killed my tree. But there's a lot of trees that will leaf out. Even the golden rain trees that I were seeing today were starting to leaf out, small leaves, and in a week or two they'll look pretty normal again. But
Yeah,
boy, the amount of frost damage to leaves, let alone the fruit. There's no fruit. I haven't found any fruit yet, but let alone the fruit damage, just regular leaf damage has been quite heavy on lots of
yeah.
things.
It was surprising. I didn't see any leaf damage on my peaches or my pears or not my pears, my plums or my apples. But the thornless honey locust, which usually comes out pretty late, a
Hmm.
lot of those got zapped, but they're budding out again. My wife had some she had at her plant sale, and they got zapped, and so the leaves are all curled and ugly looking. She couldn't sell them, but they're budding out, looking really good. So they've got the ability, those vegetative buds, to kick those back out that same location where at those nodes. So I wouldn't get too excited. Give them a chance to kind of come back. And there's not really anything you do.
Right.
Just let
But
them
it
come
was
back.
fairly stark this year. I mean, people usually don't notice frost damage in their yard, but this year they certainly did, and they were very concerned about it. So I've had just a huge, I think this year I've had more calls than normal, and most of them have been on frost damage.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the calls I had. What do I do? Well, just see if it'll come back. My concern is not so much about the leaves. My concern is about the young trees and maybe some tissue damage around the cambium,
Yeah.
because that usually
Sun
you don't get
scald.
that part of a freeze when the
Hmm.
sap is flowing. You don't usually get that, but we got the sap flowing, and then we got that hard freeze. So
Right.
we won't be able to see again. You all have
Yeah, I've
already
been
seen.
looking for that, but I guess it's too early to really see the
Yeah,
results of
it,
that
it may
on these
actually
young
be a year
trees.
or two before we see evidence of that. The tree
Right.
will come out, it'll leaf out just fine this year. But if the phloem has been damaged, they you're not going to get food down to the roots, so the roots will eventually starve to death. So it may take a couple of years for us to see. That'd just be interesting to see how it happens.
The other thing that I've seen, Ron, that has really increased this year a lot is just people doing soil analysis. I mean, I have had a ton of consults, people giving me their soil analysis and then helping them interpret that for
Yeah,
their fertilizer. There's just been, I think, maybe 4 times as much as I've seen in the past. So maybe there's been some great things on the radio or something. I don't know, but there's a lot of people doing soil analysis this year.
I think Tom did a newspaper article on it not too long
Who?
ago
Oh,
too.
Tom. That may be it because there's a lot of it.
yeah, yeah. So bees, my bees are doing fine.
Yeah, I've
They're
had so many bees in my yard.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
They
this was
they
a
were
great winter for bees. I
Yeah.
mean,
yeah, they survived. The problem
yeah.
you run into when you have a warm winter like this with bees is them starving to death in the spring. If they don't get blossoms to start feeding, they'll use up all the storage that they've got
Yeah.
and end up. So I've had colonies die that way,
Yeah, I
sadly.
don't know, Julie, why you haven't seen them, but I have seen in my backyard, even my grandkids who run around and mostly notice if there's candy, they were noticing the bees. So,
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I've got a lot of neighbors that keep bees, and when my tulips and daffodils were up and nobody else had flowers, I would go out and film like, 6 to 8 bees all fighting over the same flower because there were just so stinking many of them.
oh, and the wasps, like she said here, the wasp queens also did rebound. So, and
yeah,
that's worse in Utah. I mean, a lot of my friends from Utah are the ones that have really noticed high populations of wasps. Here, I guess I'm kind of. It seems normal amount of wasps, but the people I consult with in Utah, they said there's an insane amount of queens wasps looking for locations to build nests.
yeah, yeah. I've seen quite a few wasps around,
Yeah,
and
it was a good year for insects to survive the
yeah.
winter.
We'll see what overwintered. What other things don't normally overwinter here may have overwintered this year.
Well, yeah,
Uh,
some of the predators too probably overwintered too, so that might balance it out.
yeah, hopefully, yeah. Um, yep. So, yeah, the insect world is really, really interesting, I think.
Hmm.
Um, let's see, other questions that Lena talked about her. Yeah, Lena talked about her irises and whatnot coming out way early. Mine still have not bloomed. I got some that the flower stalks are up now, and they're about ready to open over these next few days. But I haven't had my irises, so here I am. I don't know, 30 miles away from Lena, and she's got about done with her spring blooms. Mine are just barely starting.
I just posted some pictures of bees I've seen in the last week in my yard, so you can see two
Hey,
of my peonies that are in full
you
bloom.
gotta love you gotta love dandelions. See, I kept bees for many years, and I was out in one person's yard this afternoon looking at their peach tree that wasn't looking so good. It had a lot of sun scald on it, from this. It's an older tree, but their yard had quite a few dandelions, and they were apologizing. I said, "Hey, don't apologize to me about
Feed the bees.
dandelions. I love dandelions."
Ugh.
But apparently you've got a very healthy dandelion crop there, Lena.
I really do because we still don't have water this year, so my grass is dead and the dandelions are flourishing.
Deep, deep tap roots, you know.
Yeah. So I'll ask you guys my question. I had a lovely day last week where I was back in the back of my house doing some stuff, and all of a sudden I heard water hitting the windows. We're talking 20 feet off the ground. I was thinking, what the heck are the neighbors doing with the sprinklers? And I peeked out the window, and there's a guy in coveralls with a hose spraying my window.
What?
So I ran out on the deck and I said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm spraying your bugs. And I said, you're doing what? Anyway, he got the wrong house,
Oh
sprayed my
dear.
whole house for bugs.
With
So
insecticide.
how long is it going to take me to have like a normal biome going on here
Well,
again?
well, it depends. You need to find out what the active ingredient was. You're
Well,
saying
yeah.
you sprayed insecticide on your house.
Why was he doing that? What,
He
did
went
he
to the
say
wrong
what
house,
bugs?
You
Ron.
went to the wrong house.
Well, I know, but what bugs was he spraying?
I'm not sure. I asked him and he said everything.
Really?
Yeah, find out
Okay.
what the active ingredient was.
So it
I,
was Demand CS, which is Lambda.
S-side pallet.
Yeah. Sorry,
Yeah.
my writing was terrible. And then Delta Guard, which is Delta Methrin,
Yeah, that's a pymethrin, and
that's how
that's
you do
that's
that.
not going
which
to
is gonna
last
kill
very long.
everything, right?
That first one will last a few weeks. So,
Okay.
and there's nothing you can do. They don't really wash off unless you would really like to take a scrubber and scrub it off. They will remain stuck there. But
I,
Well, yeah, I'm
the
hoping they didn't
pymethrin,
get very far.
yeah, the pyrethroid, it's not going to last that long.
right.
But that's weird. You probably could sue the crap out of that guy.
Well, yeah, it wasn't him. So I have a neighbor behind me, and her house number is the same as mine, but hers is and a half. I'm 752. She's 752 and a half. And
What?
when they wrote down the address in his schedule for the day, they didn't put the half on it. So
I thought that only happened in Harry Potter movies. Platform 9 3/4.
well, we share a driveway, a lane.
Oh my gosh.
That's what it, but anyway, and he felt
That
pretty
may not
bad.
be, hey, that may not be the last time. You're going to get her mail, and when she wins the sweepstakes, you're going to get the payment. It's going to be great.
There you go.
Sure, we'll take that. But anyway, that was my odd experience, and now
Oh
I'm
my
waiting to
gosh.
see what the
You'll have to
fallout.
write that one down. That's crazy.
And I wonder why people do that. Why did they
They
spray
get
their
worried
house?
about spiders, I think, Ron.
Spiders
Yeah,
are
I think
good.
that's
I
what one
know
of the
that's
biggest things she
and
wants.
there's hey, there is a lot of publicity for doing it. I mean, you turn on the radio or you watch anything, there is a lot of um, commercials about how great it is, to
Yeah, spray
spray
to get rid of
everything.
all the bugs. Get rid of all the
Yeah,
bugs.
yeah.
She also sprays for voles every year, her yard.
Sprays
Spray
for
for
voles.
both.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
weird.
has the company come, and I'm always like, okay, you're wasting your money.
Yeah, but she probably doesn't have any voles.
I bet you that company really likes her.
Yeah, but here's
I
the
think
deal: you
it's a
probably
great
won't convince
company
her
that
that
does the
that
voles.
doesn't work because hey, if there's no voles in my yard, that's working, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, she lives next door to me, and I have them by the thousands, so I don't know why she would think it's working.
I,
Oh, so she does have voles, and it's
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see clover mites climbing up on your houses and things like that. But even those, other than the fact that they smear red when you squish them, they're not a problem. They're just there. They feed on
Yeah.
plants, but they
Well, it
start
made me really
migrating onto
sad.
structures.
well. Here's the deal: if there's a way to spend money, and there's a commercial that says you should do this, people love to spend money on their yards. They love it. They will do whatever it
Buy more
takes to get.
flowers for the bugs.
Yeah, they'll spend whatever. They don't think it's a waste, Ron. They everybody thinks it's you're doing something great, and anything that they can spend on their yard, they will spend. So it's just one of those psychological things. It's like waxing your car every week. That'll take the paint right off your car.
I was
I
really sad
have
because I get a lot of those little ground spiders right up next to the house. And
Yeah,
they do a lot of mite control and things for me, so I'm really hoping it didn't kill all of those.
well, you'll find out
Yep, I sure
because it'll
will.
be the mites that come back because those two insecticides that he was using do not kill mites. They won't have any
Great.
effect on
No,
mites
they
at
won't.
all.
Great. It's gonna kill everything else, and I'm gonna have a mite
Yeah.
invasion.
Yeah, you have to be using a miticide to get those, so they will probably rebound at some point.
Trying to think what other questions we've had. Oh, we could talk about that rose disease that we keep getting questions about.
What's it called?
I'm trying to remember.
Something rose disease.
With
So
the
to
galls?
preface, no, it's
It's
not one that we get here,
it's a
really.
red something or other rose disease. Red.
Yeah, so we've had several people contact us and say, this spring my rose looked weird, so I took a picture of it and Google told me that I have this disease.
Oh, no,
So
I
I
didn't know there
really
was a
did
new disease.
so I really did some research on it one day, and it's for hot, moist environments. So, southern United States. Most of the places I was seeing research from, Oklahoma, Alabama, Florida. Um, so anyway, for most of these people, we've talked to them since, and their roses have pulled out of it. It was just, it was a hard spring on the roses, so it took them a minute. But just, I guess, a cautionary tale of if you're going to look something up using Google Lens or another program like that, then go back and search that answer and make sure it fits what you've got.
Right.
Yeah, because a lot of diseases will look like other diseases. In fact, a lot of nutrient deficiencies will look like diseases. So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
really hard to know.
I think what was happening was the new growth on the roses were coming out, and they come out red. You
Yeah.
have a lot of red tint to those roses. Something's wrong with my roses, and so they looked it up, and there was this red rose. I don't know. I can't remember.
That's what it was. Rosette disease.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Yep.
Rose, and so it causes kind of a witch's broom on the roses, not
Right.
this normal red growth that turns green. So
But you're thinking it wasn't that. It was just normal spring
No.
weather and stuff.
yeah.
Well, and because we got hot and cold, I think they just held on to that red color a little bit longer than normal this year.
And then also, if they had a
leaking out as fast.
fairly heavy infestation of insects like aphids, that can change the color and the leaf structure a little bit too, and make it look like a disease. So,
Yeah.
just something to think about. I didn't see the pictures or anything, so.
Yep. Just another interesting thing.
Deanna, that was great. I learned a lot. That was wonderful. Make sure and let us know so that we can, when you do that class, send me an email because I've got an email that is for my Bannock and Bingham Master Gardener specifically that I can reach out and, touch somebody. So send me specifically. So, but remember, you got to reach out and touch me because I'm brainless. You'll have to say, Reed, send this to your Master Gardeners.
Okay. So instead of just taking individual emails for the newsletter right now, what I'll probably do is I will send out our dates for that Capture the Flavor class in all the different counties. Give me a couple days to solidify the rest of the counties, and I'll send that out to Reed and Ron and Lena. You guys can send it out to your list. Would that work?
Yeah,
That works for me.
We got quite a few Jefferson County people in our gardening stuff since
Yes, we do.
Joseph is more of a foliage guy, so
Perfect. I'll get that solidified. If not this week, for sure next week.
Okay.
It's a busy last 2 weeks. It's Maycember.
Maycember.
It's about how the last of the year goes, right? The last 7 months of the year.
Yes.
Okay. Well, all right. Don't see a whole lot of other gardening questions. We've just been winging it, so we'll be back in 2 weeks.